Boker Tov. Yomi is Nazir Daf Tes Vav, Nazir 15. On today's Daf Yomi, we're going to start at the Mishnah on 15a. The Mishnah tells us, if a person says, Hareini Nazir, I just want to say at the outset, there's a lot of different approaches, radically different approaches as to how to read this page of the Gemara. So we're going to pick one approach and of the rush, and we'll power through. But it's not an easy daf at all. Hareini Nazir Ukshiyeli Ben. If a person says, I'll be a Nazirite when I have a son, V'Nazir Me'ar Yom, and then he also says, and I'm a Nazirite for 100 days. So therefore, no Adwal Ben Ad Shivim. So the Nazirus, when he has a son, is going to overcome the earlier Nazirus that he started, because he took Nazirus to have a son first. But this Mishnah is teaching us that if he has a son and the son is born prior to 70, prior to the 70th day, we'll see, it means including the 70th day, and we'll see possibly even including the 71st day, then lo hifsid klum, then he hasn't lost anything. And the way commentaries explain this means that he can observe the Nazirus of his son at the same time that he's observing the earlier Nazirus. But if he has the son after day 70, so Sarah, and take out the word shivim. Then he loses. What's he losing? Now he can no longer count the Nazirus of his son concurrently with his own Nazirus, and he has to pause his own Nazirus, count the Nazirus that he took upon himself for his son, and then resume his own Nazirus. She'ein teglachas pachas mishloshim yom, because you need to have a teglachas. The haircut has to be a minimum of 30 days, and so therefore, since he can't count the Nazirus of his son within his Nazirus, he needs to count a separate Nazirus for his son, and then go back and count his own Nazirus, because there needs to be a pronunciation of 30 days minimum for each Nazirus, and so therefore it has to be distinct, and so therefore his son's Nazirus, if it would be 30 days, could be subsumed within his own Nazirus. But if it's not within 30 days of the end of his Nazirus, he has to pause his Nazirus, take the Nazirus for his son, and then resume his own Nazirus. But now Rav comes along with a Chiddush, which is going to occupy our Gemara. Rav says, Yom Shivim, Ola Lakan Olakan. He says, day 70 can count actually in this direction and in that direction. What does that mean? So the Rush explains this, that if, let's say, he has a child anytime prior to day 70, and including day 70, then we're going to say that the birth of the son will count in both directions. What does that mean? The Rush explains. Let's say he gives birth to a son on day 70, then that day counts for him as 2 days. That's the Chiddush here of Rav, according to the Rush. A day will count for him as 2 days, meaning to say he has the beginning of the day prior to the son being born, and that counts for the Nazir as though he did day 70, and then he has the end of the day, and that counts for the Nazir as though he's starting his count of 30 days, and therefore, as a result of this, day 70 is also day 1 of his count for the Nazir for his son for 30 days. So therefore, day 71 is day 2, and then we're going to get to day 99. That's going to get to day 30, and so therefore he can cut his hair on day 100, and so day 100 therefore corresponds to what we would have thought was day 101, and so therefore the reason is because day 70 counts both for the Nazirite for himself and also for the Nazirite for his son, so it's counting as 2 days. And what's the reason why, according to this approach, Rav is saying that you could cut your hair on day 100. Normally, we say you need to cut your hair on the day after you complete your Nazir. So at the end of the day, you're only up to day 100. So why are we counting day 100 as 2 days? So the Rush explains, because biblically speaking, you could really cut your hair on day 100. It's just rabbinically we require you to wait to day 101. And so therefore, for this reason, in this case, Rav is saying you could cut your hair on day 100. The basis of Rav's principle, Ola Kan, is based upon the principle that we say Mikta Sayom Kikulo. This is a concept throughout Shas that if you do a portion of the day, it's as though you've done the whole day. But Rav is saying it's not like the whole day is completed, because if the whole day was completed, then you wouldn't have the ability to count it as 2 days. But really what we're saying is that once you've done a portion of the day, you've completed your responsibility for the day. Now that the rest of the day is left over, and so therefore you can do two partial days on that one day. There's a lot to say about this concept of mitzvah sayom kikuo, but we'll go on with the daf at this point. So Rav says Yom Shivim ol kan. So the Gemara says, but can we really say that? The Gemara first challenges Rav from our Mishnah, because what does it say in our Mishnah? Tanan no one lo ad shivim lo hifsid klum. It says in our Mishnah that if you give birth to the son prior to day 70, he hasn't lost anything. And if we're saying like Rav that it could go up in both directions, why should it say you haven't lost anything? It's skuri miskar. You've actually gained something. You gained a day. So it shouldn't use a different language. Ella, so the Gemara says, Badinhu dulo listening ad shivim. Really, we should change the expression. It doesn't say if you give birth until 70. But mishum de katani seifa achar shivim sosa, because the latter clause of the Mishnah says if you give birth to the son after 70, you lose days. Katani reisha shivim. Therefore, it says in the earlier clause that if you give birth therefore it says in the Mishnah, if you give birth, it uses that language of lo hifsid klum, but really it's you've gained. So the Gemara says we have another problem with Rav Tashma mi seifa, but let's try bringing proof against Rav from the seifa where it says in the concluding clause no ad achar shivim. So say that if you give birth to the son after day 70, you've lost. So this is a problem, because really, if you give birth according to Rav, if the son is born on day 71, then the Naziris would end on day 100, and you could sacrifice on day 101. So you really have till day 71, not until 70. So that's a question against Rav. So my answer is no. My achar. When it says after 70, it means 2 days after 70. Well, achar mamashma. But if really it's on day 71, then you really haven't lost anything. So what Rav says when it says after 70 means day 72, not 71. So the Gemara says, well, this is a problem. Then why in the Mishnah does it say if you give birth until day 70, you haven't lost anything? It should actually say, I feel achar shivim. It should say even if you gave birth till 71, you haven't lost anything. So Ella Shmamina Achar Mamash. We really see from here that Shmamina, we learn from here that when it says Achar, means really the day after 70 you're in trouble. So this is a problem with Rav. And this is the language of Nazir. It's different. Here we mean Shmamina. It's really a question of Rav. We learn from here that our Mishnah is not like Rav. The actual text of the Gemara, the physical words here, the literal words, is a little bit. It's a little bit challenging to work with the syntax of where we normally read Gemaras. That's why people say Lashon Nazir Mishuna. The language of Nazir is different, so we have to base our reading on the backs of the commentaries. And anyway, we see from here that Rav's position here that we say Mikta Sayom Kuku, a portion of the day is like the whole day, and that the day can count that the one day therefore can count in both directions. Really a double chiddush. Not only do we say a portion of the day is like the whole day, we're also saying because we say a portion of the day is like the whole day, we can count the day in two directions. So if that's the case, but our Mishnah is not like Rav. So who does Rav hold like? Now Rav doesn't need to hold like anybody. Rav could hold like himself. Rav is also throughout the Talmud also called a Tana. But Rav doesn't like to just hold by himself. Rav likes to have an earlier source for whom he can rely upon. So the Gemara says, "V'Rav kaman amar l'shmaiteh." Like whom does Rav also hold like? So the Gemara says, well, maybe he holds like Abba Shaul. Maybe when Rav says mitzvah sayom kikuo, he maybe holds like Abba Shaul. Now we know that the most famous case where people know that we apply this principle mitzvah sayom kikuo is by sitting shiva. That on the seventh day you don't sit the whole shiva, Rahman al-Azlan, that you just sit you sit a portion of the day and then you're done with the shiva. So maybe this principle of Rav, mitzvah sayom kikuo, is derived from the fact that we have mitzvah sayom kikuo by shiva. And so maybe that's this source for Rav. So the Gemara is going to say, maybe he holds like Abba Shaul. Now we're going to the Mishnah Moed Katan. Akovers Meso Shlosha Yavim Kodem L'Regel. If a person buries their dead 3 days prior to the festival, then he has lost the concept of he doesn't have to sit shiva anymore. Once he's done 3 days, he doesn't have to do shiva. Now this is not how we paskin today. We say as long as he's done one moment prior to the festival, he doesn't have to do shiva. But the Mishnah of saying in Moed Katan was 3 days. And if you do Shmoni Yavim Kodem L'Regel, Batul Mimenu Gezerah Shloshim. If you do 30 days, if you do 8 days, then you don't have to do Shloshim anymore because the 30-day period in the morning, because after Shiva, you've done another day. That's the 8th day. Mutar Saper Erev HaRegel. And therefore, since the Shloshim is done, you can cut your hair on the eve of the festival. But if you didn't cut your hair on the eve of the festival, then the only reason why you're allowed to cut on the eve of the festival is because of the honor for the festival. So therefore, if you didn't cut before the festival, you're not going to be allowed to cut after the festival until after the Shloshim. So until after the festival. So the Shloshim would end as long as you did 1 day before the festival. Abba Shaul on the top of Tesvav Beis, Abba Shaul says, "Afilu siper kodem haregel, mutar saper achar haregel." So Abba Shaul says, even if you didn't cut your hair prior to the festival, you can cut your hair after the festival. Just like when you did 3 days of mourning, you cancel Shiva. Once you've done Shiva and you observed a portion of the day you did Shiva, and then you observed a portion of the day prior to the festival, you don't need to continue with the Shloshim. Shloshim is canceled. The 30-day period is canceled after the festival because you observed a portion of the festival on the eve of the festival. And so therefore, we're seeing that according to Abba Shaul, my time with Abba Shaul, he says, well, if you've done a week before Shiva, before the festival, the 7th day is counting for Shiva, and then the end of that 7th day is counting for the Shloshim. So it must be because Shvi Oil He says the 7th day counts for the Shiva, and then it counts for the Shloshim. So we see that the 7th day counts as a portion of the day in both directions. So therefore, we're saying that Rav's position that it says Oil Lakan is really consistent with the position of Abba Shaul. So the Gemara says it's not necessarily the case that Rav is the source for Rav is Abba Shaul. Maybe Abba Shaul only says his law by Avelus, which is rabbinic. And Tosfos here explains that biblically speaking, Eino Aval Yom Rishon. Tosfos here adopts the position that Shiva is rabbinic and that the only morning that's biblical is the first day, as it states, V'acharisa k'yom mar. But and that's a source for the idea that Shiva is not biblical. Only the first day of mourning is biblical. But by Nazirus, which is biblical, because we learned out from the verse earlier that you need 30 days, maybe we wouldn't say, because we said Yiyah, the gematria of Yiyah is 30. So therefore, maybe in those circumstances, we wouldn't apply this principle of mitzvah sayom o kan, that the portion of the day goes in both directions. So Tosfos says you can't say that Abba Shaul is the source for Rav, because maybe Abba Shaul is saying only his law by a rabbinic law, but not by a biblical law. So the Gemara says El Rav, the Amri, the Amar Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says, okay, I have a different possible source for Rav. What's a different possible source for Rav? Different possible source for Rav is that maybe Rav is saying his law in accordance with the position of Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya, we learned Rabbi Yossi said with respect to the laws of bringing Karban Pesach. So Rabbi Yossi said a Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom. So what's a Shomeres Yom? Shomeres Yom is a woman. So there's two, just as a background, there's two periods of time where a woman could see blood according to Jewish law, that she could either have it during 7 days, which is called her days of Nida. So if she sees blood during a time that's marked as her days of Nida, then she has Tumah for 7 days. If she sees, however, blood during the next 11 days, those are days that are called her days of Ziva. And during those 11 days, then if she sees blood on 1 day or 2 days, she has to wait 1 day. And on that day, without seeing blood, she goes to the mikvah. And then at nightfall, she is going to be tahora again, ritually pure. If she sees 3 days in a row, she has to wait for 7 clean days. So the concept, but this is, by the way, today everybody assumes anytime a woman sees blood, that is not from a wound, and it's we're assuming that it is a nida, and she has to wait a minimum of 7 days. Plus, there are other days afterwards, but that's taking us on a tangent. But anyway, the point is, Rabbi Yossi says, "Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom." So this woman is waiting for her clean day after she had the blood of a ziva, of a zava, and so she let's say she sees blood on. Let's say she sees blood on the 13th of Nisan. And then the next day, the 14th of Nisan, that's her day that she's watching to make sure she doesn't have any blood. She doesn't have any blood in the morning. So that what did they do? They decide to include her in the shachting of the Karban Pesach. And so shachtu v'zarko b'sheni shela. Then they slaughtered the Paschal lamb and they sprinkled the blood for her. And then she goes to the mikvah. Then that afternoon, she sees the blood. So she can't eat the Karban Pesach that night. So harezu einochel. As the Brisa says, she cannot eat the Karban Pesach. Upturo milahasos Pesach sheni. But she doesn't have to bring another Pesach in a month, which is called the Pesach sheni. She doesn't have to do that. Why doesn't she have to bring the Karban Pesach a month later? My time with Rabbi Yossi. What's the reason why Rabbi Yossi says she doesn't have to bring it? Rabbi Yossi must be in the position that on the eve of Pesach, since she had a portion of the day where she didn't see the blood, we're going to say miktas hayom kekula. We're going to say it's as though she didn't see blood the whole day, and so therefore the Karban Pesach was properly slaughtered for her. So she doesn't have to eat from the Karban Pesach. She fulfilled the mitzvah of having the Pesach slaughter for her, and so therefore she's exempt from the second month. So therefore this proves that Rabbi Yossi is in the position miktas hayom kekulo, and this is therefore the source for Rav. The Gemara says, why? How do we know it's a source? Mimai v'dilma mishum nekasavar mikanahu abba humetame. So maybe we have to take out those words. We have to say that we have different girsa, and we have to say mishum nekatzaver mixas hayom kekulo umikanu abba umitame. And not only do we say that Rabbi Yossi's other position, we say that a portion of the day is like the whole day, and so therefore, once she becomes tamei, when she sees the blood, that's already starting the next period of tumah. That means to say from that point on she's tamei, but there was a period of time in between where she was tahora and she was able to participate in the Paschal lamb, and so therefore the seeing of the blood only makes the woman tamei from that point on, and it's not going back to the beginning of the day. And so we see from here that Rav holds like Rabbi Yossi that you can break a day into two parts. And we say this concept of mitzvah sayom kekulo. A portion of the day is like the whole day. In the morning, she had a portion of the day where she didn't see blood, and so therefore it was her shomeres yom. It was her day that she watched, and therefore she was eligible for the Pesach. And then the afternoon was her day where she was where she became Tameya, moving forward again. So the Gemara says, well, okay, if you want to say that Rabbi Yossi is the source for Rav, We have a problem with that. How can you say Rabbi Yossi is the source for Rav? Me Savar Rabbi Yossi Hachi. Does Rabbi Yossi really say this concept of Mixus Ayom Kikuo Vatanya? We have a brisa also from Sachem where Rabbi Yossi Omer. Let's say you have a Zav Baal Shtei Re'iyos. Let's say you have a Zav, a man who has seen these two emissions from his body, and if a person sees if this person sees these two emissions within a 24-hour period, then what we're going to say is that he has to wait for 7 clean days, and then on the 8th day he needs to, and then he has to go to the mikvah on the 7th day. Zav has to go into a mayan, into a spring water, not rainwater. And so anyway, the point is that Rabbi Yossi, going back to the brisa, the Zav was seen 2 re'iyos. So on the 7th day, he goes to the mikvah during the day. And they slaughtered the korban pesach for him. They slaughtered the korban pesach. And then later in the day, he saw it. Even though we're going to say that everything they touched that morning, even though they thought they were tahora because they had done a portion of that day in a ritually pure state, we're going to say retroactively is actually ritually impure, but p'tura me'la, so it's Pesach Sheni. But they're exempt. They are exempt from the Pesach Sheni. But Rabbi Yossi is also saying that the things they touched at that point were tamei. So if we said that the portion of the day is the whole day, then at that point, before they see the blood or the zav, they should be not making things tamei. So why does it say everything that he touched looking backwards is going to be tamei? So the Gemara's first answer is naila mafreya midrabanan. The Gemara's answer is no. It doesn't mean that it's biblically speaking tamei. It means that anything they touch, we're going to say rabbinically is tamei. But biblically speaking, we're really going to say it's tahora because Rabbi Yossi says, biblically speaking, we apply this principle of mitzvah ayom kikulo. So the Gemara says, and indeed, I'll bring a proof to you that because this is logical. It's logical that Rabbi Yossi is only saying it's retroactively tamei rabbinically. If you want to say biblically speaking, it's tamei. Why do we say he's exempt from making the Pesach Sheni? Because if you're saying that biblically speaking, he's tamei, then he should have to do the Pesach Sheni again because he was never eligible to have the Pesach Sheni slaughtered for him. So therefore, this proves that when we say he's tamei retroactively, anything that he touched that morning was tamei, it really only means rabbinically. The Gemara says that's not necessarily a proof. Really, I would say, I could really say that actually the tumah retroactively is biblically speaking tamei and not rabbinically. But with the case of korban pesach, they said the home deziva itiru, that even if you became tamei from a zav, like an unexpected flow, they said that you would actually, with respect to the korban pesach, that you are not going to be disqualified from having the korban pesach slaughtered for you, and therefore the korban pesach could be brought on your behalf. And so therefore, I might have thought that. And so therefore, since it would have been halacha Moshe Sinai, it's possible that the tumah l'mafreya would be biblical, and still you're exempt from the Pesach Sheni. So the Gemara says, so therefore, the Gemara is suggesting, Gemara said that Rabbi Yossi, can be the source for Rav, because Rabbi Yossi has said that biblically speaking, we say mikzah sayom kikuo. So the Gemara says, Va'af Rabbi Oshia savar umafreya midrabanan. Also, Rabbi Oshia is saying that in this case of Zav, who in this case of the Zav who has 2 re'iyos, that we're going to say that retroactively everything he touched is tamei, but he can participate if they slaughtered the korban pesach for him that afternoon. He's exempt. And also, Rabbi Oshia is saying that this tumah that he has is only rabbinic tumah. The Tanya Rabbi Oshia Amar, because Rabbi Oshia taught Haroa zav b'shvi shalo, somebody who sees this flow on the seventh day, so ser eshel fanav. That according to Rabbi Yossi, if somebody sees the zav sees it on the seventh day, we're going to say so ser eshel fanav. He's going to destroy his count, and he has to start another 7 clean days. But Rabbi Yochanan lo nistor elo yoma. Rabbi Yochanan says he only loses that day, and so Manav Shach, and the Gemara says, I don't understand. The Gemara says, I don't understand why Rabbi Yochanan says he only loses that day. Iso ser kuso ser. If he doesn't say mix the same kakul, and if he sees something the zav on the seventh day, he should lose everything. And he also ser lo nistar v'lo yomo. If he doesn't lose, he doesn't lose anything. Ema lo nistar v'lo yomo. So it must be that he doesn't really lose anything because mitzvah yom kulo, and really from that point on he's mitame, and so therefore he's really completed his 7 days. But Amalei Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Oshaya says to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi kai kavasech Amar mikanu abba mitame. He says Rabbi Oshaya said to Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Yossi holds like you because he says that it's only tamei from this point onward, but not. Retroactively, he's not going to be tamei; it's just rabbinic. So the Gemara says, how can Rabbi Oshaya say that Rabbi Yossi says that you're only tamei from this point onward? So, Rabbi Yossi l'mafrehu damer. How could he say to Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Yossi is only tamei from this point onward? Doesn't Rabbi Yossi say that he is tamei retroactively? So the Gemara explains, Rabbi Yossi. When he says he's telling me, it means Lamafreya means only rabbinically. So the Gemara says Rabbi Yossi Savar Michte Mitzvah Sayom Kikula. So if Rabbi Yossi is really of the position that a portion of the day, once he's done, a little bit of the day of Shomeres Yom, a little bit of that second day, it's as though he's done the whole day in a state of ritual purity, then if that's the case, Zava Gemura, the Maisi Karban, how can you ever have 3 days in a row of a woman having a flow? Because once you've done the first part of the day, you say in a state of ritual without a flow, it's as though you've done the whole day. So how could Rabbi Yossi ever have this day of this concept of a Zava Gemura, of 3 days in a row? So the Gemara says, well, Kivan de Chazia b'Palgei Diyoma idach Palgei Diyoma Salka with Shimor. Once she sees no blood for a portion of the day, the whole day should count as though she saw no blood. The Gemara gives 2 answers to this question. One answer is this woman has a continuous flow; it never stops, and so therefore she can never even claim for a moment the miktas ayom kikuo. Or alternatively, that she saw the 3 days, but it was always right before sunset. So meaning to say, let's say she sees Sunday night right before sunset, going into Monday night, going into Monday. And so therefore that's 2 days right there. And then the next night she again sees it right before sunset going into sunset. So even though the days are not falling exactly, at the critical point where we could count mitzvah yom kikul, it flows right in. It doesn't even need to be 3 full days, but it needs to be at the critical point where it turns into the day, where you start counting the day. At that point it's flowing. So therefore, according to the second approach, mitzvah yom kikul has to be said at the beginning of the day. And that's the difference between the first part and the second, first Ibai Sema and the second Ibai Sema. So we say Hadran Hareini Nazir is a difficult daf, a challenging chapter, but we thank Hashem Yisbarach for giving us the strength to study it together. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address.